I don't know why.
All right, it's October 3rd, 5:45 p.m. First item on the, present are council members Lang, Barker, Hottinger, Marmee, and Mr. Labutus is sitting in for Mr. House. First item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $47,500.
Yes, sir. We have two officers that are going to be retiring from the police department, and this will be their payouts.
Motion. Second. A motion by Lang, second by Barker. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor send this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $95,125.57.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next two items are basically just a procedural, or both procedural that we need for our CAFR and our main audit that occurs every year. This was something that wasn't done in the past. We realized that it needs done. So we've already recognized the money, and it's basically a journal entry. It's all I'm asking you to approve.
Motion by Lang, second by Barker. Any questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor send this on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item is a request for appropriation in the amount of $13,716.68.
As what I previously stated, same with this.
Motion by Lang, second by Barker. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor send us on the full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And with that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up, I believe is safety. Yes.
I call the safety committee to order. Present are members Mr. Lewis, Mr. Barker, Ms. Blind, Mr. Harrison, Mr. Hauser, and Mr. Rapp. This evening we'll be considering resolution 22-95, a resolution to establish a policy and protocol for appropriations by council for acquisition and use of network surveillance programs and biometric surveillance technology.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to present this to the council or to the safety committee, and thank you for giving me some time today. So I guess first I'd just like to thank Director Moore, our law director, for working with me on this. This is a really collaborative process, iterative process. The draft that's here tonight, it's probably about the 7th or 8th draft. So I appreciate the work that you did with me on that. Also like to thank Director Hickman and Chief McKee. I know they'll ultimately have some things to say on this, and maybe we don't see eye to eye, but that's okay. That's what this is all about. But I do appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me, and hope that you at least felt like I tried to address your concerns as we move forward with this. So I guess let me just start by saying there's a few things this legislation doesn't do. It doesn't prevent the police from doing the Newark Police Department from doing anything they do today. It doesn't prevent the Newark Police Department from, getting video from somebody's ring or using facial recognition to ID a suspect. It doesn't really curtail anything that they're doing today, and it's not intended to curtail anything they're doing today. There's 6 kind of substantive sections to this. The first section deals with situations where we may not necessarily need an appropriation for a network surveillance program. So one of the things I do in private practice in my other job is write commercial contracts with companies that are in private equity. And what I can say is this legislation really comes from my concerns around working with a private company that has a lot of private equity backing them. Those investors are after more data and they want to sell your data. And so as we move forward as a community, I think it's important that we can give some consideration to the fact that we are doing business with somebody else who's really, their primary concern is not necessarily the law enforcement or even privacy within our city. So the first section is meant to address making sure we're always kept in the loop. Second and third sections are meant to address just making sure we've got an opportunity to look at contract terms. So we have an opportunity to look at what Flock's promising they're going to do and get comfortable that we think they're actually going to follow through with the safety protocols that they put in place. Sections 4, 5, and 6, I think, are really the most important parts of this legislation. Really 3 things that I think we shouldn't be doing when it comes to a network surveillance program that's capable of tracking everybody's location and their whereabouts throughout the city over a period of time. So section 4 deals with just making sure we're never going to market or sell the data. I think it's important that we as a community are able to say to our citizens, hey, we're not trying to sell the location data for where you've been over the last 30 days. We're never going to enter into an agreement that allows that to go on. The next section deals with retention. So Flock has said they're going to retain data for up to 30 days. And I think that's an acceptable period of time. So we're just putting that right in the legislation. Flock may get bought or what another company in the future that we want to work with may have a longer retention period. 30 days seems like a pretty reasonable cutoff, so hoping to limit it. And then the last section deals with biometric screening, so particularly facial recognition. So I think it's important that any sort of system that has this kind of network capability of tracking movement over time really shouldn't be in the business of using people's facial features to identify them and track their whereabouts. So that was intended to address biometric screening, facial recognition. Did include a carve out there at the request of the police chief to make sure we're not curtailing anything they're doing today as far as utilizing videos from people and how we do that in our investigations today. So that's kind of the overview of the provisions in this. I would say if there are specific questions or comments or concerns, I've been very willing to make amendments or adjustments to this on the fly. Can certainly do that tonight, or happy to do that if you're sending it on to full council. So open to any suggestions.
I'd like to hear from the chief and the safety director on this issue. And as far as location, you're worrying about people's locations. Well, I think we all got smartphones. I think everybody already knows where our locations are at. So I don't understand that part of it, but I'd like to hear from you guys, see where you guys stand.
I guess I'll go first.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm opposed to this legislation. First of all, we don't even have a system. We just found out today that the grant was approved, but we're talking about a system that we don't have, okay? But having said that, I think maybe there's some misunderstanding. It's not a tracking system, okay? It monitors a specific area. If a vehicle or a person goes through that area, then it will pick it up. But it's not capable of tracking an individual person and all of their movements, okay? So if that's what the conception is, that's not correct. And Chief McKee can speak much more intelligently than me on the actual operation of the system. But first of all, I'm opposed just on the concept of legislating policy and operation of law enforcement systems. I don't think that that's necessarily a road that we want to travel down. I think that's going to create unnecessary burdens on the law enforcement community. I think it's going to have unforeseen consequences at some point down the road. It's going to hinder their ability to do their jobs. As far as policies and procedures, there are already policies and procedures in place that are actually pretty in-depth for the operation of these systems. And, we're all for transparency. We have nothing to hide from anyone. And certainly, we would want to keep council aware of anything that's going on with the system. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. I would also like to say that I do appreciate the way that Councilman Lang approached this. He was very open. We had great dialogue back and forth, but sometimes you just agree to disagree, and I think that's where we've landed on this.
So the other cities that have these cameras, the council hasn't proposed anything for them in their cities that you're aware of?
I really can't answer that question for you. That might be a better question to direct towards the chief.
Ms. Honor, if you could step to the podium, please.
It's actually just a question for you.
Oh, okay.
If we didn't have this legislation, how does the reviewing of the contract as it stands now, the procedure goes? Who does that go to?
Well, typically, whenever we enter into a contract, we send it to the law director's office for them to review before we sign anything. Director Rhodes is our contracting authority, so he would be the person that would actually sign any contract, enter any contracts.
So service director and both review the contracts for you guys?
Yes, the chief would. I mean, I would see it, the chief would see it. The law director would have, have input on it, and ultimately the service director would be the one to sign it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Just one minute.
Yes, I was up pretty late last night, well, this week researching it, and with the 1,400 cities that have this, they said that they're interconnected and that they share information. So what does that look like for us? It says it's not a tracking system, but that's what I want to know.
He knows much more than me about the operation.
Chief McKee. So, Heath let's just say Heath just got the system. So if there is a stolen car that is entered into the criminal justice information system and it passes one of these cameras, it sends an alert to our car that says this vehicle just either left or entered this specific point. So that's all it does. So if there is a stolen car from Heath, it tracks over into our city, if that makes sense. So all the cameras interconnected that way, but the same thing, the data, just like Councilman Lang said, is 30 days and it all disappears regardless of city. The only time the data continues on after that is if we use it for an active investigation and we actually pull a picture of a car, then that goes into our evidentiary rules, and those are governed by law as well. We do keep those obviously evidence longer. I mean, if it's a homicide, it's like pretty much forever. It's like 100 years. So that's when that data would continue to live in our systems. So.
Go
Oh,
ahead.
good.
No, go ahead.
Oh, Mr. Parker, go first. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, clarify for me, if the city of Heath puts, their police department inputs a vehicle, then that is a way that it can be tracked. It can't just track random motorists going through the system.
No,
it has to be put into the system.
Correct, and a query has to be made if we're doing like an investigation. But we have safeguards in place to all that data. Leeds is incredibly strict. NCIC is incredibly strict. Deputy Chief Logan and I had to take a recertification test just today on operation of the system. Those backings are backed by law. We've actually terminated and prosecuted officers for misusing the system in years past. It is a very serious offense. It's actually a felony. So any of this data is extremely protected, regardless of the policies put in place.
Mr. Marvin, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a business where data mining has become really, really lucrative to private companies. And where my concern comes is not with what you do with the data and what you're utilizing, but the company that we're with, if they have that availability with the data mining and they share that information with another organization or something, even if it's just statistical data, that's data mining from our data. And that's where my concern comes in because, and like if they upgrade or do something else, then again, more data can be obtained. They can utilize it for data mining purposes and not for law enforcement purposes. And that's where I want to make sure that we're safeguarding the data, that if we go with this system, how is our data going to be safeguarded so it's not utilized for data mining?
Yeah, and that's, this is unfortunate world we live in. As Councilman Harris said, the second you turned on your cell phone today, and right now it's collecting more data than this system is ever even capable of. I just believe this legislation at this point in time is for something that does not exist within that system, which is facial recognition. That is, if you ask Flock, that's not anything they're interested in right now. That's not anything that they currently have. As a matter of fact, with Ohio being a rear license plate state, the cameras are actually situated so they actually pick up the rear of the vehicle. Also, you have to remember, these are on a city street. As much as people don't like it, you have no expectation of privacy driving on a city street. Driving is a privilege, not a right, in the state of Ohio and in the United States. To operate a motor vehicle, you give up some laws, and that may be having your photograph taken by a system. So it is unfortunate. It's just the world we're living in now. I can't control the data miner, and you know what I mean? If that's the systems we put in place, we have systems, computer systems that this city uses that collects way more data. So if that's the route we're going, we would really have to probably look at, if we use YouTube, Google, Microsoft Teams, I'm imagining those all track everything, and we utilize those now on a daily basis. So, I mean, if that's what the city wants to do is renew those contracts, and you guys have to renew them. I mean, that's up to you folks. So, because that's where we're heading with this. This has bigger implications than just this system, and the system isn't set up to do any of this yet. It's just a possibility of it at some point in time.
You bring up a good point about the other systems that we have in place with Microsoft and some of the different softwares and different things that we utilize. And that does have facial recognition on some of those, as well as other types of tracking. We do sign contracts with those companies. Could we maybe have Law Director Moore address that issue more in depth? Not to dismiss you, Chief.
No, hey.
We'll still ask you plenty more.
Hey.
Yes. I have reviewed the Flock contract, and it does talk about data collected, that the city is the sole owner of the data collected, that they are claiming no rights to that data, that it will be erased by 30 days, but for what the city wants to save. So that is a big part of that contract. If they would ever want to change that, we would have to sign a new contract, and we would have to review that, and we would have to agree to that. As it stands right now, and I know you've read the contract as well, they are not claiming any rights to our data. It belongs to the city of Newark. They're leasing the cameras and I guess giving the interpretation of the data to Newark, and that's the way I read that contract.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. However, you didn't address my question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about data collection and contracts.
We are.
Okay.
But in this legislation specifically, there's many times where you can write a piece of legislation with a specific thing in mind, but that piece of legislation has no mind. So it covers whatever the words on the piece of paper says it covers, regardless of its intent.
Okay,
So we have software now that the city utilizes, that we have contracts with, that do facial recognition, that do collect other data, like through Microsoft, for example. That do collect other data and are susceptible to data mining. How does this piece of legislation affect contracts with those types of
it
companies?
doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay,
This is specific to NSP and facial recognition, is my understanding, and specific to this type of technology, including block.
so there would be no accidental overlay.
No, it was
Any other
written,
system that the city.
it was written
utilizes.
as narrowly as possible to address the concerns regarding the flock system.
Okay.
Sorry, I misunderstood your
It's all right,
question.
it's all right, happy to.
Mr. Harrison, thank you.
Okay, Chief, back to what you said earlier, so if he has them and there's a stolen car that comes in New York without the cameras, if someone steals a car and they're heading into North, does the Heath Police contact you guys?
Only if they know that. Well, right now, they don't have that technology, right?
But if they know it, then they would get you guys involved to try to help
Correct.
that. So basically the cameras is going to be a better situation to help.
It's just a much more efficient way.
But yeah, okay.
But I don't necessarily think Councilman Lang is opposed to the camera system themselves, just some of the back end of it. But once again, it doesn't exist yet, but in the future, it could. So you're legislating something that could exist in the future.
And then one more question and I'll be done. So say Flock sells their system to somebody else. Then Trish, we would have to write a new contract with that new company. Because if they
It's
get.
kind of like when your student loans, I would imagine, are passed to another company, as long as they're abiding by the same terms of the agreement. I don't think we would have to, but if they are trying to change any of the terms in that agreement, we would have to.
Okay, so we would have that opportunity to come back here and then discuss that then. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. And I appreciate everybody's input. I guess there's just a couple things I
And
want.
sorry, we wouldn't do it here. It would just be a contract that would the police
Right,
would
right.
receive that I would review. Probably the service director, safety director,
Okay.
et cetera. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate everybody's input. I guess a couple of things I want to make sure we're really clear on. So contracts terms change, right? And so and the contracts themselves incorporate policies that can be changed when a company is acquired. The fact that that wouldn't necessarily come back to council, I think, does give pause for concern, because that's exactly the scenario that I would foresee happening. Private equity wants to get acquired. This company gets acquired by Facebook, some other big company who now wants to sell the data. They push down terms. We agree to them because now we get 50 more cameras for free. And now all of our data is being sold by whoever just acquired that private equity company. That's what I'm trying to prevent. Now and long term, I think we need to send a clear message to our people, our citizens, that we're never going to sell data on the people of Newark. And honestly, that to me is the most critical part of this whole piece of legislation. And if everybody said we want to take everything else out and just pass that would make me happy, because I think that's my biggest concern. I do think it's important that we're clear on what kind of information this system collects. And I don't think we're in a position today to get into detail on here's what it's going to collect, here's what it's not going to collect. I think whenever the appropriation comes through from Flock, you'll have somebody here from Flock who can answer some of the questions, as we've talked a little bit about some of this stuff. I do think it's absolutely a way of tracking movement throughout the city, because it does keep track of license plates as they pass different locations throughout the city. So I just think we need to be mindful of, yes, we're saying we like Flock and we like the way they're setting things up today. And that's honestly why some of the choices we made around 30-day retention versus shorter, longer seem to make sense what Flock wants to do. They're not going to sell our data. Great. Let's just make sure we do that for the long term. So that's really all I'm trying to do here. Really, again, worked hard to make sure we're not actually telling the police they can't do anything they want to do today or pursuing. And so, okay, thank you.
Ms. Black.
Yes, sir. Thank you for coming. First, appreciate you guys a lot. One of the questions that a citizen posed was, in light of the recent health emergency where government stepped in where normally they wouldn't take a role, would that be a possibility with this?
What are you talking about?
Well,
You have to be
in
a little-
recent example-
you have to be a little bit more, that's like
Well,
really,
for
really big.
example,
So-
we were talking about, where there were mandates, you weren't allowed out past a certain time, or
I'm not sure the system is designed for that. However, let's just say you get to a point where there is martial law, which is similar along the lines of what you're saying. At that point in time, we will utilize whatever tool necessary. And if we do have that tool, then it could be used, right? But obviously you give martial law as the last
it is.
ditch effort, right? And citizens give up a lot of freedoms during that period of time. That could possibly be one of those. Would it? I doubt it. Could, sure. Yeah. I'm not gonna say no, because we're not there. Once again, the same thing with this. Who knows where, we can look into the future, you can't see what's gonna be, you know.
Just a point of clarification, citizens do not give up a lot of rights during that period. Those rights are taken from them. Just a very specific point of clarification.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I would just make a comment, and I said this to Councilmember Lang earlier today, when we talked about this again. I really feel strongly that we should not be legislating our police officers in our department. And I trust the chief, the deputy chiefs, and safety director to do what is right to protect our city and our citizens. And so that's part of the reason why I struggle with this legislation, because I feel it is an overreach. And I would just like that entered into the record.
Any other questions or comments? Mr. Ryan, you can step to the podium, please.
Colton Ryan, 394 Clarendon Street. So, thank you, Chief. From doing my due diligence, so when you're driving by the camera, for it to collect somebody that's, that's wanted, it does collect our information, right? So in order, so it's like a phone. So in order for it to gather
It
information,
takes a
has to
picture of
listen.
the license plate and then
Yeah.
runs it through the system.
Right, so,
But if it doesn't have a license plate, it can't do anything.
Right. but in order to catch the person that's wanted, it has to catch information from everybody in order to catch that person. So what I'm saying is that it collects everybody's information to catch that one person, right? So like,
Yes, it's just
in order to
it's
catch that,
collecting it and dumping it.
yeah, so it doesn't just collect that person that wants. So
Mandatory collection.
yeah, so it doesn't just collect the person that has the warrant, it collects everybody's. Sure. And then, they eventually get that person. Okay,
That's correct.
so, okay, I just, whenever, it non-discriminately collects everybody's information, correct?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, but just one final thought on this. I do understand the concerns that folks have raised around, and just general concerns that Director Hickman and Chief McKee have raised around just legislating relative to the police. And I guess what I would say is, generally speaking, when they want to buy new cruisers, and they want to get new equipment, they want to basically get funding for anything, they have to come to us for that equipment, those tools. And this doesn't change that relationship. This really, the only time this would change that relationship is the situation where I described earlier, there might be a data sale going on and we're getting something for free and they don't need an appropriation. This just makes sure they have to come to us. Given that funding relationship, I would say it's not inappropriate for us to specify parameters around any tool that we propose. And I think legislature generally does that at the state level. They do it here at the local level in telling the police what they can and can't do with the equipment that they get to a point. Now, this is not legislating policy, and I took out every reference to policy at all. And I get that. And I think on my, as far as like locations of where we're putting it, we're not telling the police where and how to use these cameras. All we're doing is putting in some parameters that really limit that third party that we're bringing in. It's not about the police, not about not trusting the police. As somebody who's gone through the Citizens Academy, voted for everything the police have ever wanted, as an advocate for body cameras. My hope is that at the end of the day, we can move forward with Flock in a manner that we know that we're protected for the moment. So, I'll stop there.
So as far as the insinuation goes of council being overreaching, council trying to legislate the police department, council's lack of trust of the police department, I don't think that in any way, shape, or form what's trying to be done here. And I don't think that could be any further from the truth. And I hope you guys realize that and believe that. Because we all feel that way. I think the biggest concern about this whole system is not what the police department is doing with it, but what the private company that owns the system is doing with it. It's absolutely nothing to do with the police officers or police department or their policy. It's nothing to do with that. It's everything to do with trusting private owned companies and what's it doing with that. Currently, what we're worried about them doing isn't being done, isn't going to be done anytime in the near future. But you know that we have concerns about that. I would entrust that you would, because I trust you, that if something like that were presented in the future, you would come to us and let us know that that's happening.
Yeah,
So
I actually told
I'm on a roll.
Councilman Lang that.
I'm on a roll here. So,
Keep rolling.
okay. So because we're talking about something that could happen in the future, then I would like to make a motion, to table this to the future as to which sometime that might come up. So table it indefinitely until that time.
I have a motion, table by Mr. Graff. Do I have a second?
It will keep talking.
Mr. Apple, or Mr. Harrison.
I understand about everything getting, your privacy getting sold. But our stuff is probably getting sold right now to a different company. We don't even know. I mean, they take our privacy stuff right now, and it's probably being sold or transferred or whatever to other companies, and we don't even know about it. So it happens every day. I understand it. I just don't understand. We want to make a big deal about our stuff getting transferred or sold or whatever. And they're doing it every day in the United States.
Mr. Martin.
There's a huge difference between my data from my phone being sold because I chose to utilize it. I chose to allow access to my whereabouts. I have Siri on there that can hear everything I'm saying. I chose to do that. With the Microsoft, all the different things that we talked about within the city that already has some of the technology and data collection. That's an internal thing. It's not for the citizens of Newark that we're gathering that data. My concern is that the city of Newark in the future could be put in a position with a third-party vendor where they are selling our data that we're collecting for our purposes and good intent purposes. And our safety forces do a fantastic job of protecting all that information. They have all the procedures in place, but this third-party vendor, all of a sudden, they put in there that they have this new technology that we can help you out more and we can do this. Well, then all of a sudden, they have access to that additional data and it can be data mined. And that is where companies are really trying to leverage themselves to get the mighty buck, is from data mining. It all started with Target. I don't know if you're familiar with the story, Target, what they did, and they gave you the card that says, look, you can be a member, and they started collecting data. They could tell when someone was pregnant before they even knew they were pregnant because of their habits and their tendencies and what they were purchasing. So they would send out coupons. Well, father was furious because his daughter, who was 17 years old, started getting coupons from Target for baby diapers and for things for infants. We'll come to find out she was pregnant. So the father was furious that they collected that data, they manipulated it, and they were encouraging her to purchase those things. That is the power of data. And what Councilman Lang and what I am in support of is protecting that data, not siphoning anything that these folks do, their procedures, nothing about that. It's all about the data and protecting that so that it is not utilized and that the city of Newark is not tied into, you gave this data, now my daughter, you're saying that my daughter's pregnant. Okay, that's what we want to protect, is something like that that happens. We don't need the city of Newark in that media frenzy. What we want to do is protect that data, give them all the tools, all the leverage, all the freedom to do what they want with the data. But let's make sure to the third-party vendor that they can't do anything that they want with the data. That's what we're trying to protect here. And I'm in full support of everything that these gentlemen do, everything they suggest and that they need. It's like, if they need it, they need it. They wouldn't come to us unless they need it. They need this. We want this. But what we want to do is protect that data, period. Not anything that they do. So all we're saying is, if anything enhancement or anything like that comes about, let's make sure that this body, who is the legislative body, gives approval to make sure, because otherwise this body's approving anything for the future. And I don't want my name tied with facial recognition and the selling of data and data mining from these cameras. Is it capable of doing it right now? No, but I guarantee you in 10 years, within 10 years, it will be very, very capable of doing a lot more. So that's what we're trying to do, not stifle anything that these gentlemen. If you want to change the other things like Councilman Lang said, I'm fine with that too. But I want to protect that data because we don't need that out there. We do not need that out there. Not from a municipality. That's not what our role is. We are not the private sector who are trying to benefit from data. That's what we're trying to protect our citizens with this data, period. That's what we're trying to do. We're not trying to sell it. We're not trying to get ahead because of it. All we're trying to do is better protect our citizens. And that's where I'm coming from with this whole legislation. Like, I think we need to have something. Can we limit it? Yeah. Hey, you gentlemen have talked about it more than I have, but I just want to make sure that that's protected. Thank you.
Yeah, I echo what the gentleman saying, 100% support the police. And, but I do understand that it's easier to build a strong fence than to go back and try and fix holes. So do it right at the beginning, set hard boundaries at first. And then, like you said, if we need to ease up in places, fine. But, because once they go up, they go up. Game on.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a comment, even though I'm not on safety committee. I'm opposed to this. I'm not about creating more legislation than what is being needed today. I think that we should be very cautious about doing something that is in the future. You could say that about any law that's on the books today, that's going to change in the future. I don't think it's something that we should be legislating something that is not needed today and that may happen in the future. We do not know 100% that will happen. And for us to legislate something today for something that's not 100% accurate or 100% for sure, I think is a slippery slope that we are taking. The law director has reviewed the contract. I trust her and know that we are solid in our data today, the way it reads. And if the contract changes, she said it has to come back. So it's going to be able to be reviewed by her or whoever's in there. Hopefully it's me. And the police chief and the safety director. And so there are already things in place right now. I just think that we are a slippery slope if we're going to start legislating things that are unknown in the future that could happen. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
All right. Do I have a motion to send this to full council? Do I have a motion to send this to full council? Last time. Legislation dies. To go full council. To our safety committee. Next up is our capital improvements. In a year.
Waiting on Marmy. Doug, will you have improvement? Okay, we'll call the Capital Improvements Committee to order. Present are Ottinger, Rath, Marmy, Labutus, and Harris. First up on the agenda is consideration of resolution 22-94, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the Municipal Corporation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We still have about $150,000 left in our capital improvement dollars. I'm asking for just a little over 34,000 to buy 2 Ferris mowers. These will be for use in the Parks Department. But our equipment, as Councilman Harris will tell you, because he's been out there, is aging, and we'd like to have 2 new mowers.
2 new mowers.
Much.
Second.
Motion by Harris, second by Labutus. Any discussion? Questions, comments? All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. That is the end of the Capital Improvements Committee. Personnel is, yeah, personnel next.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting of the Personnel Committee to order. Those present are myself, Lang, Cottager, Budis, Barker, and Ryan. First up on the agenda is ordinance 22-40, an ordinance amending the department authorization tables of the city of Newark. Department of Human Resources is creating the position of risk control and education specialist and setting the compensation therefore. Mr. Spurgeon.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. The piece before you seeks your support. This would be within my division and department. This is a collaboration between myself and the superintendent of our water division. We had a position, an asset that was solely dedicated to providing services to the water department, safety and training. We'd like to expand that reach. This would be more of a global position. It would reside in my shop. We've added an educational piece to it so we could identify unsafe practices, show our folks how to be safe for future endeavors. And again, we would continue to provide training to our friends in the water department. We also believe this will keep our BWC experiences low, which is a good thing for all of us. We certainly urge your support.
Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon. Entertain a motion. Motion by Labutus. Second by Barker. Is there any discussion?
Clarification.
Yeah.
When would this begin?
So through the chair to Mrs. Hodiger, we are not asking funding today. That this would be a partnership. This would be in next year's budget. I'm envisioning a 70-30 split. I do realize there's priorities in any budget and I'm hoping it survives, but if it doesn't, I want to be clear, we're not asking for money this evening.
Just creating that position.
Just creating a position, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Spurgeon, I understand there's you've worked with the law director on an update to this, the legislation that was in the packet.
Yes, so thank you, and I certainly want to thank our director of law. I am still learning to use the software to run strength authorization tables. There's one vacant but unfunded position, and I believe that is position, the next last one, the ordinance 667.02. Now, we just want to show that to you to make sure you're aware that that is created but unfunded this time.
Thank you. So you're seeking then to replace 2240 from our packets with 22-40A, which as you explained, has everything in the department, which was omitted from it.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we would.
Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to amend. Motion by Labutus, second by Barker. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Okay, all those in favor of amending the legislation to replace 2240 with 2240-A, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great, so the legislation is amended. Any further discussion then on 22-40 as amended? Mr. Murray?
Yeah, just have a question as far as, now this is for somebody who's going to be basically analyzing other employees throughout the city, correct? And there could be opportunities or not opportunities or situations where they could have to write up another employee. Is that correct?
There could be, but I want to be clear that it's not my office's intention to discipline anyone. We prefer to make enhance awareness and conduct training.
Okay.
So if it came to a pure disciplinary process, we would report that through their chains of command, make recommendations. They could choose to do what they wish.
My concern is that we have a union, this is a union position that we're basically trying to create here. And that union person could actually be observing and recognizing and having to write up other union employees. Could that be a concern in the future, or could it be something that would put them in a bad situation with the unions?
Through the chair to Mr. Marmy, I believe it's not a bad situation. So we have crew leaders, for instance, in our water distribution, as we are now. So we do have members of the bargaining unit responsible for the performance of others in the bargaining unit, and I've not observed any conflicts of interest, any unwillingness to execute their duties.
Okay, so my final question then would be, why did we choose to put it in as a union position?
Through the chair, Mr. Marmy, thank you for your question. This is a revision of a previously, it was in the bargaining unit. So anytime it was in the bargaining yesterday, these are the primary duties. That would be an erosion of the bargaining unit to put it somewhere else. And so that's the logic to keep it within the bargaining unit. Certainly, my office, the Human Resources Director is the appointing authority. I'd be responsible, make sure it's being done appropriately. But that is the logic.
Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon. Any other questions from the committee or the audience on 22-40A? Okay, with that, we will vote to send this on to council. All those as amended, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Great, so that will go on to council, full council, as 22-40A. Next up on the agenda, ordinance 22-41, an ordinance amending the department authorization tables of the City of Newark Department of Service, Division of Cemetery and Parks, creating the position of Assistant Superintendent and setting the compensation therefore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We have a unique opportunity to extract some institutional knowledge from our superintendent, who has served a long time and has served well. Our service director believes, and I agree, we must make some plans. We can't count on everyone to be here forever. And again, we want to create a second in command. The director has some ideas on how he may wish to pursue that, who to appoint. The thought being, whoever the new superintendent may be, could certainly learn from our current superintendent while they're here.
Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon.
And again, I'm anticipating Mrs. Sotter's question. We're not asking for money.
What makes you think I would ask that?
Just guessing.
There we go. Okay. Quick motion from Mrs. Sutton, second by Barker. I understand with this one, similar to the last ordinance, we wanted to update it to expand the table and include everything in the department.
Yes, I failed to recognize position 343265101, which is a crew leader. It is on the books. It's a legislative created position, but it's currently not funded. I've not had any conversation with the director, but I do not believe it's his intention to fill that.
Gotcha. So I guess one question I pose, and I'm curious if any of my colleagues have any thoughts one way or another. Given that's unfunded, I don't know if it makes sense to just eliminate that now and then reintroduce it later. I know as we go through these, we generally try to eliminate positions when they're unfunded. I don't know if Director Rhodes has any thoughts on that.
John, I have no problem eliminating that position. When I served on personnel committee, Councilman Marmy and myself always like to clean up tables. If we feel as though we need that position in the future, which we do not plan to fund next year, and that would be 3 years without that position being funded, I can always reapproach council.
So, I mean, my personal thought would be to eliminate that position, and if Director Rhodes doesn't have a thought one way or another. So I would motion then that we, I don't know, Tricia, the best way to do this, we do have the 2141A. Should we do two separate amendments or just do it all as one?
I would prefer probably all as one.
Okay.
Easier, so I can write an amendment abolishing
Okay.
the position through.
All right. I guess I can go ahead and make the motion to replace 22-41 with 22-41A, with the exception of marking out the crew leader project assistant position that we're no longer funding. So motion by Lang, second by Barker. Any discussion on the amendment? Okay, with that, all those in favor of amending, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. So the amendment passes. So now we will consider 22-41A as amended. Any further discussion on that? Okay, with that, we'll both send that on to full council as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. All right, that passes. We'll go on to full council. And I believe